We get into fall with a very significant couple of weeks. It's another case where the big promotions offered some of their very best yet in 2024, and while that may result in some more obvious match selections, I can assure you that the 5 I've picked are all heavy hitters. With that being said, a reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I do choose to talk about are all based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning, as I will be talking about match finishes here too. After watching 89 matches spanning 19 promotions, here are a few of my favorites from the first half of October. I didn't do a great job of following the build-up tags to the Yuki Ueno Shinya Aoki match, but knowing that the Harashima defense was up next, I made sure to correct that. The first outing in Shinjuku Face blew me away, cramming a whole bunch of great work into a breezy 10 minutes. Nearly the entire first half is dedicated to Harashima grappling with the champion, and it is fantastic. It seems easy to simply praise Aoki for his dedication to presenting his wrestling as a struggle, but what really stands out to me here is that all of the moving parts are contributing to that resistance, and it's never hard to digest. It feels like there's always some sort of leverage or counter that makes every limb active as these two spar. It reinforces the idea of fighting for every inch. This is the difference that Harashima makes compared to when Aoki faced Ueno. He can hang with the champion, and that makes the instances where he might even best him feel like a huge deal. It's a narrow escape for Harashima out of this first half after attempting to go one more round with Aoki. For something that is entirely mat-based, he really sells the exertion of going hold for hold with the champion, which is a nice touch. Koruku and Ueno incorporate higher impact stuff, and that tonal shift ramps up the energy for when Aoki and Harashima square off again. You get a bit of everything heading into the finish. Back to what I said about earning every inch, there's a sequence where the match falls on the position of Aoki's left foot as he's attempting to lock in a Manjigatami, and that about sums it up. After a nice little segment with Koruku, Harashima would secure the win with a Somato, though despite the win, it never felt like he had any decisive moments against the champion. There are still questions to be answered heading into the big title match. For some further viewing, the tag match on the 13th is also great, and you get an interesting swap with Ueno on the other side. I prefer this one with Koruku over Masada, but both are well worth seeing if you have 10 minutes to spare. I actually caught this one as it aired. Hearing that it was going on first, I pulled it up at my kitchen table and watched it with my older brother. I really liked it then, and upon a rewatch in a more conventional setting, I like it even more. I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't getting concerned with this current CM Punk run. I thought the previous matches with Drew had some flashes of brilliance, only to get bogged down by bad stipulations, friendship bracelets, and Seth freaking Rollins. I couldn't help but consider the finale of this trilogy to be a litmus test for what Punk is allowed to do at this stage, and I'm relieved to be proven wrong. That isn't an indictment on his ability by any means, just that the nature of the previous two didn't give me much faith in the booking. It felt like WWE was apprehensive due to Punk's injury history and that they overcompensated as a result. Thankfully, these two wrestled unimpeded, rehabbing a tired stipulation in the process. It was Punk's goal to resuscitate Hell in a Cell, and the first step in doing so is in the way he reveres the cage. There's a foreboding demeanor to his promos and interaction inside the cage that convey that he doesn't want to do this. It's only out of necessity and a palpable hatred that is all but absent from WWE matches these days. I mentioned that reverence for the cage, and I think that's reinforced by how the actual walls are treated throughout this match. They sell the contact with the steel mesh like death, and the cage itself is what draws first blood when Punk takes that nasty looking lawn dart. It's a matter of going back to the original concept of making the cage the gimmick itself, rather than just the setting the match takes place in. It feels redundant to have to point that out, but with the way these two handled it, it places a refreshed emphasis upon it that really makes all this work. When plunder is introduced, it's employed in a very grounded, simple way, but doesn't sacrifice its impact. Things like Punk hitting a drop toe hold onto the binding of the table, or using the legs of said table as a weapon, were these small but effective ways to put a new spin on spots that many of us have grown numb to at this point. Punk's delivery in these moments is especially brutal. The point of contact on the toe hold is Drew's throat, and he uses the table legs in an attempt to strangle him shortly after. He's actively trying to take the air out of his opponent's lungs, and I don't need to spell out what that means here. Drew is very good here in his own right, providing a lot of the larger set pieces based in blunt force trauma, and has a hell of a gusher when it's his time to bleed. I'm not going to act like I know the true nature of his wound here, but I'm cool with letting the magic or lack thereof take over. Punk takes full advantage of the cut late into the match, and it just looks awesome. By the time they do get to the closing stages, the ring is a complete mess, and it just feels right. That isn't to say it's free of its issues though. It is long in the tooth, and incorporating the charms from the friendship bracelet does feel a bit silly compared to the tone of the rest of the match, but that seems like an unavoidable product of the environment more than anything else. Regardless, I still thought this was great. Obviously the blood, violence, and hatred is what will draw you in, but when you zoom in closer, I think its biggest strength is how much they're able to get out of the simplest of ideas in the starkest way possible. That's something that has CM Punk's fingerprints all over it, and I was delighted to see it. Odds are you've seen this match by now, and I don't need to keep rambling about it. It's arguably Drew McIntyre's strongest work, and a very loud reminder that Punk can still go, whether you like it or not. A while since I've featured multiple WWE matches in the same video, but credit to where credit is due. The October 7th Raw not only hosted another fun Sheamus Pete Dunne match, but also the rematch between Sami Zayn and the ring general Gunther. There's an interesting wrinkle to this particular match, as Zayn is still the challenger and a perennial underdog, but Gunther has the added motivation of getting his win back from WrestleMania. Because of this, there's a little extra mustard on Gunther's initial headlock takeover, or the suspended boot wash in the corner. He isn't able to gain definitive control though, as Zayn is evasive for the early goings. It's those emphatic cutoffs from Gunther that bring this into a closer contest, and the trading of sleeper and blue thunderbomb attempts are on a knife's edge, giving a real sense of escalation before the second commercial break. The crux of this match for Sami is not of his own efforts. If anything, he has Gunther beat again. Unfortunately for him, he hits his best shot on the outside. The exploder haluva kick combo on the outside leaves Gunther in a heap, and the time it takes to get him back to the ring is just too long. Zayn's biggest mistake is to not go for the cover following another haluva kick. He looks for the hat trick, but in the time it takes to tee up, Gunther is lying in wait. I can't think of a worse person you could give that kind of time to. It is still the least assured Gunther has been in this main roster run, which leaves the door open for Sami to realistically see it through. For Gunther, it all comes back to his demeanor entering the match. He won't lose on hubris this time, recognizing this after the 1 count on his powerbomb. He lets the moment register, sure, but wastes no time to cinch in the sleeper hold for what eventually put down the challenger. A main event between these two is always going to have a high floor, but I appreciate what they were able to do with presenting Gunther in this vulnerable state without diminishing his better qualities. I'm not quite sure yet which of the 2 title matches I prefer, but this follow-up retains why I believe these are the 2 best wrestlers in the company. When I started this channel a few years ago, I wanted to use the series to expand my tastes and see wrestling from all parts of the world that maybe I haven't tried before. It took me long enough, but I finally got to checking out current WXW with their annual World Tag Team Festival. It was 2 wrestlers I am familiar with who wrestled on a taping earlier that week that was the highlight for me personally. I'm not turned away by the goofier side of Fuminori Abe as others are, but Timothy Thatcher is the type of guy who is able to reel him in without sacrificing personality. They both are still very animated in this match, but after Abe throws a very cynical slap to the face, Thatcher makes it clear he's not here to mess around. Thatcher initiates the cagey grappling you'd expect, though never fails to take pot shots of his own when given the chance. It isn't the indignant frenzies of violence we've seen in Abe matches in the past, but rather a more calculated heavy-handedness from Thatcher that complements the grappling. He dictates a great deal of the match and feels like an obstacle for Abe to overcome for the match's entirety. Where Abe does find success is through targeting the vertical base of Thatcher, primarily with leg locks and in true Abe fashion, closed fist punches to the knees and legs. This escalates into a more dedicated brawl both in and outside of the ring. This makes for a much more even playing field and the slugfest rules. It does lead to the eventual finish, which I really like too. Abe goes for his signature wind-up punch, but by doing so, telegraphs the strike, giving Thatcher the opening to counter into a flash submission. It plays off that idea that a split second could drastically change the course of any match. This is a real cool matchup that's worth seeking out, and while you're at it, check out some of the Tag Festival as well. We close out this episode with Bryan Danielson's finale as a full-time wrestler, defending the AEW World Championship against the coward Jon Moxley. It's a hell of a thing, and there's a lot to unpack. The way this match begins, it feels like the screen should go black and the credits should roll. The reality is, we are privy to everything that happens, and it's not pretty. The hot start leans into a vital element of this match, which is the crowd investment. Obviously, with the stakes and on home turf, this crowd wants to see Bryan Danielson win, but in this case, there's a much more genuine vitriol towards the heel that is sorely lacking in AEW. They stay with every peak and every valley. For instance, the nasty ways Moxley drags down the champion and milks it, like simply holding his boot on Bryan's injured neck to let the crowd simmer, or making the sign of the cross before attempting a pile driver onto the exposed concrete. As much as he dispels it in the promos leading into the match, this is personal for Jon Moxley, and he relishes the opportunity to twist the knife. I think this was Marina Shafir's best showing in her role in these Moxley matches as well, adding fuel to the fire at the right moments. By now, we have lived with so many Danielson comebacks, and the Tacoma audience reaches fever pitch here. Though given the circumstances, that seed of doubt planted heading into the match left me with the feeling that even with the momentum, that magic is going to run out. Despite this, Danielson would do everything he could to make us believe, and in so many cases, belief can be a cruel thing. There's one particular moment that makes this clear as day. Moxley kicks out of a Busaiku knee, and the air is let out of the Tacoma Dome. There is a unanimous, silent acknowledgement of the writing on the wall, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Credit to the audience as they sprung back into full voice in spite of the near fall, but you cannot escape the feeling that the walls are closing in. I've spoken in the past about matches that are designed to deliver that gut punch, and how difficult that can be to execute without it feeling cheapened or missing the mark entirely. And while you could consider the finish a shock, they start to pull that hope further and further out of reach with 7 minutes still to go. You only have that sinking feeling with little time to process, driving home the intended emotional response. Before talking about the end of the match, I will touch on the booking by saying it's a damn shame they neglected this angle after the efforts of these two. It felt like Bryan Danielson's parting gift was a blueprint of what AEW could be between this main event and the post-match angle. I think there's enough evidence to support that Jon Moxley is not the problem, and I hate that they diminished what should have been a canonical moment in AEW's history. I do try to view these things on a match-by-match basis though, and what we did get on this night was a violent, desperate, heartfelt death rattle from the American Dragon. A nice bit of continuity was a callback to a lot of Bryan's major losses earlier in the year, leaning into the yes chance far too late into the match. When he did this while leaning heel, it felt like it came from a place of arrogance, but here it feels like it's coming from a place of helplessness. It comes full circle as it once again fails him, and Jon Moxley puts down the American Dragon with one final sleeper hold. For those who were turned away by the finish, I can see it, but this match is a goodbye, and the thing about goodbyes is that they're often sudden and uncomfortable. You wish you had more time, though we rarely ever do. It's the realest pro wrestling has felt to me in a long time. Goodbye for now, Bryan Danielson. You did not go gently into that good night. And before I go, here are some honorable mentions. Hijo de Canis Lupus vs El Hijo del Fishman from IWRG October 3rd. A far cry from their wild brawl in February, though I thought it was refreshing to see these two take things to the mat in the return fixture. D-Courage vs Not Hug from Dragon Gate October 4th. A breathless 15-minute draw from two of the stronger teams in the promotion. The two Team Noah tags from October 6th and October 14th. Not a lot of wrestling holds to be found in these matches, just a bunch of old dudes hitting each other, which I always have time for. The two Meiko Satomura tags, also from October 6th and October 14th. While I prefer the 200 kilogram match from the last video, Seeing Mako face off with the Big Two and Tej, as well as one of the best tag teams on the planet back in Sendai Girls, was bound to be a good time. Jay White vs Hangman Adam Page from AEW October 12th. More great stuff from these two and what might be the best AEW pay-per-view opener all year. And last but not least, Hiroki Goto vs David Finlay from New Japan October 14th. These two managed to carry their momentum from the G1 and put together a very solid semi-main. Finlay's smarmy heel work pairs nicely with the incredibly endearing run from Goto. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I had to say. Be sure to do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing, and I'll talk to you again next time as we progress further into autumn.